Hey everybody, Eric Dorward here with the Spartan Rocketry Club, continuing our build of the Estes DARC-1, and we are definitely in the finishing stages at this point. I have done some of the painting, but right now, I'm going to do this quickly because it's kind of time dependent. The bottom part here is ready for decals. I've cut these out of the sheet, toss one in here. This is nice warm water, hence the time critical element. While it remains warm, it's easiest to work with. Now, while that's soaking, needs like 30 seconds tops. So I painted the central tube here, this light gray color. The wings are black. In order to do that, I just painted the whole thing gray to start with, and then I taped off as much as I could the middle here, and then painted the fins black. I could not figure out a way to not paint the shock cord. I mean, there was probably a way, like, I could dangle it like this side and only do the top, but honestly, it became more trouble than it was worth. So part of it's gray, which is unfortunate because it's probably not great for the elastic to have spray paint on it, but I couldn't see a way around it. Now, to apply the decals, as I said, I've soaked it in the warm water. The question is, where do they go? Well, to do it, I'm just going to refer to the box art. Here's the ship, right? The rocket. These fins seem to go onto the upper surface, so like here, for instance, and it looks like they go most of the way down, but not the whole way. So let's get that out of the way. This is a big one, so the big ones tend to go on more easily, but still, I'm going to take my time. I'm going to kind of slide it a little bit to get it started. That looks good. And then I'm going to hold it on with my two fingers here, and then carefully and slowly pull the backing away so that hopefully it just lies flat and I get as few bubbles into it as possible. Okay, so that's pretty good. I'm going to try to adjust it a little bit so that it's all the way into the crack. And yeah, I mean, I'm pretty pleased with that. It looks like decals kind of hung over the side a little bit, and there are definitely some bubbles. Bubbles I can deal with. So I'm going to chuck the other one in, and then I've got this bit of paper towel here, and I'm just going to carefully do a combination of like dabbing and pushing to get any of the bubbles out. By and large, there aren't that many until you get out here on the fin, like the wing tip. And then there are a few, but it's not bad. Looks like there's one right there I can't seem to get rid of, but it's not really that noticeable. You can try to get your finger wet and try to brush it. That actually might be feature of the fin itself. Like I might not have sanded that perfectly well, so a distinct possibility. All right, let's repeat the process with the other side. And you don't want to leave it in so long that it slides off really easily. Like I'm getting a good amount of resistance here. That's actually good because it makes your life easier when you are taking the backing, applying it like so. Because if it just slides all the way off, it's probably going to release far more quickly than you actually want it to. So a little bit of resistance, there's nothing wrong with that. Just be careful that you're pulling the backing and try not to pull on the decal itself because they can tear and you can deform them just by pulling on them. So those are things to be avoided. All right, again, I've got a little bit more of a bubble up here this time than I did the first time. By and large, yeah, the middle of the part near the body tube seemed to lay quite well. And it's out on the tips here where I have anything that really needs to be smoothed out. All right, I'm pleased with that. There is one decal to go on the back, And yeah, how do I know that? Well, I can't find it in any of the imagery here or here, but the instructions do have, let me chuck it in while I'm talking. The instructions do have an underside view, and you can see, well, maybe you can't, but I can see that there's the decal that says Estes, and that looks like it's going to go on the underside. It also looks like that might be a decal too. I'll have to double check that. I didn't notice that at first. Oh yeah. Well, while that's soaking, I'm going to cut the other decal out. It's this one right here. I use scissors. The instructions say to use a hobby knife. I don't think there's any particular reason why you need to use a hobby knife most of the time. If you need to do any kind of like sharp angle cutting inside of something, then yeah, I do tend to use a hobby knife then. But by and large, I use scissors, and that's because I'm better at cutting with scissors than I am with a hobby knife, unless we are talking about my own hand, which I can do pretty well with both, as it turns out. All right, let's see, the Estes decal, it goes like this, and it looks like, you could start it wherever you want, I guess, but it looks like it starts pretty close to the little bump here. So I'm going to kind of just eyeball it. And there we go. Chuck this in while I'm at it. Okay, same deal. This actually had a decent amount of bubbliness in it, or at least air trapped in there. It's not really like it was a misshapen bubble, but right in here, it didn't lay quite flat. So I definitely need to smooth that out. Yeah. The coat, my paint coat here, could probably be better too. The gray paint that I used wasn't the best quality, to be honest with you, and I'll show you in a little bit um, one particular example of that where it went awry. But all the effort that I put into smoothing out the grain, I mean, by and large, the grain is mostly gone. There are a couple little divots I see here and there, but it's pretty good overall. Yeah. Oh, turns out there's another decal apparently, but we'll start with this one. So this one, it looks like it's supposed to go right up flush against the retainer. Now remember, I haven't put the retainer on because I don't want to glue anything to the retainer. But I can at least put it on temporarily. Try to put it on temporarily. It would be nice if I weren't holding that. There we go. Okay. This I'm just using as a spacer to figure out where it's supposed to go. Again, I'm going to pull a little bit off back so I can get it started. And I'm not going to put it completely flush against that engine retainer because it's not a permanent feature yet. So it might end up not quite being there when I actually apply it. Okay. That looks pretty good. It's not quite straight. It looks better. Yeah, the one thing you do need to be aware of is that while, I mean, these are three straight lines, right? You can deform the decal by putting too much pressure on it. And if you do that, lines won't be straight anymore. All right. In investigating this, it looks like there is one additional decal that is supposed to go on here. It looks like it's supposed to be this one, and it's going to go like up here, I guess. So again, quick trim. By the way, the wing decals, since if you recall, they had like a white checker pattern on them. That required some care. Usually, when you're cutting with scissors, you want to cut on the line or maybe just outside the line. Like right here, I don't want to cut into the decal, so I'm cutting just outside it. But for those, you actually need to cut inside the line, which is a little, uh, you gotta make a conscious effort to actually do that right. Because you don't want the black dotted line that shows you where to cut. In reality, it probably wouldn't make any difference because it would be black on black. You probably wouldn't see it, but something to be avoided. Anyway, it looks like the instructions want this to go. It looks like it's supposed to go very close to the end of this line here, but it's not gonna. I mean, I don't want to put this over top of the ring here that we put on before. So it's going to go on the other side of the ring. It's not going to quite line up, but I can live with that. It's not that big a deal. My water is quite lukewarm at this point, so it's a good thing, fingers crossed, there aren't any more decals that go on this bottom piece. Okay. I do have some bubbles in here, and I do want to line it up. Now, I can't, I'm not going to take the time to actually draw a line to make sure that they're directly lined up properly, but that looks pretty good. And if you really do care about such things, then you could physically draw a line, I guess, but you'd have to then figure out how to remove it after the fact. All right, every time I touch this, it seems to get stuck to me a little tiny bit. So I'm going to get a little bit of water on my fingers. That should resolve that. And just brush everything out. Okay, that was actually more work than I expected, but still, decal work. It's not bad. The last thing I really need to do, well, there are a couple minor little things that need to happen with this. One is I need to put a loop in here, and that's just tying a knot, so that's not a particularly big deal. The other thing I need to do is I didn't do a great job of painting the edges. This one I don't care about because it's going to get rammed into the top part of the rocket, and it's probably going to get messed up anyway. But, I want to take this off before it gets stuck. There we go. Ooh, yeah, I took some of the paint off. That's okay, because it's going to go right back on eventually. But the edges here didn't get painted particularly well, and that's me. I didn't do a great job. So instead of going back and painting them, I'm just going to grab a Sharpie. This isn't going to be too bad either because this is a flat edge. Remember, I didn't actually round this. So the Sharpie actually works pretty well on a flat edge. I'm just going to draw over top of it. Like so. I just want to be very careful about the top because I really don't want to get any Sharpie on the gray part that is supposed to be gray. So I'm just very carefully going to put the last little touches on at the top. What is that? A little bit of debris. Same deal on this side. You could certainly use like actual paint to go over this too. Or you could just do a better job spray painting. That would be the ideal solution here. But the Sharpie is a pretty quick and easy alternative. I guess I might as well do some, but not all, because it's pretty close quarters there. Some of this face too, just so it looks better. And I'm not going to get in too far here because, I don't want to touch the body tube that is gray and is supposed to be gray. So that's good enough. What the heck, might as well draw on that too. Now the Sharpie is a good match for my black spray paint. It is not a perfect exact match, but you really have to go looking to see that you've touched it up like this. And I'm not going to go looking, and I can't imagine anyone else would either. All right, so this is basically done. I am going to clear coat. Ooh. I must have bumped the bottom here when I was working with the Sharpie. So I got my hands wet here, and I just smoothed that out. I need to dry it again, but I'll do that later. So this is basically done. It needs to be clear coated to protect the decals. So that's going somewhere over here, I guess. The last thing that I'm going to do quickly here is look at the top part. Now, the top part, I put a bit of primer, plastic primer on this because it's like all plastic except for the fins. I did spray paint these with white primer and then sanded them down, and then I painted everything the light gray color. And finish is kind of meh. It's not really great, honestly. Here it's pretty good, but here in the most curved part, it is kind of grainy, and I don't love that, but it's also going to be really hard to fix, and there's some likelihood that it was the plastic to begin with. Then I masked off the part right here where the gear is going to go, where the launch comes out. I'm going to have to remask them and do that shortly. And then I taped around here so I could paint the top part this darker gray. And I did not the world's greatest job. I got some blistering in here, probably from using too much paint, so something to be avoided. But the last bit that needs to be done is the nose cone canopy, and two chunks down here need to be painted black. So I'm going to demonstrate how I'm going to mask this off. So I have two different kinds of masking tape that I generally use. This is ultra sharp lines, but it's kind of like, it feels like duct tape. It's plasticky. I can't tear it very well. This is the just sharp lines, and it has the feel of normal masking tape. It's higher quality. I like it better. So I'm going to use this. I'm going to start off tearing myself a little chunk here. I'm going to start by remasking this part right here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this in half so I have two edges that are like factory sharp lines. And then I'm going to trim some of this off. And I'm going to just put the factory lines outside to cover up. There we go. You know what? That's all right. Then I'm going to grab my hobby knife and I'm going to carefully cut along this impression only through the tape, mind you, not my hand, but also not through the paint either. Just ever so gently want to, I just got to do it again. Complete cut there. All right, so that's masked, and I'm going to repeat the process on the other side because my tape is too wide to cover this properly, but that's fine because I can cut the tape down the middle and it can overlap, and that should address the problem. All right, make sure that you push flat, because otherwise paint can get underneath, and then I'm going to trim across. It's like the start of the cut is harder to do for some reason. All right, that takes care of masking off the gear. Now, like I said, you definitely need to make sure that that this edge here, you push down on it so nothing gets through. So these two chunks right here are going to get painted black. That shouldn't be too hard to manage. So I'm going to get a short piece of masking tape here and just follow this line. Now it's curved, so it's not going to be perfect, but because the line isn't that long, it shouldn't make that much of a difference. I need to mask off up here as well. I'm going to mask off the whole dark element eventually, but for the time being, quite in the right place. There we go. That should work. And I'm adjusting my tape. I'm going to get wrinkles in it, and that's fine. That's not a problem. but I'm doing my best to follow the contours of the nose cone here. And last but not least, let's get that out of the way, I need to follow this long line here. This is at least straight, or at least really close to it. So that is not a problem at all. Okay, I'm going to do the other part of that on my own, so you don't have to watch. The harder part is going to be dealing with the canopy here, because the canopy is curved pretty significantly. The best way to address this is to, you can get yourself a decent sized piece of tape, but you're going to end up tearing it. Like anytime the curve of the tape, or the canopy is more than the flat line that your tape is, then tear it off and follow the curve again. So I'm going to have a bunch of pieces of tape here. And so far it's only 2, but going around this corner, or this rounded bit, yeah, that's going to take a good amount of tape. So I'm not going to, I'll get this a decent sized chunk, but not a huge piece, because I'm going to have to tear it a bunch in order to follow the curvature. Ooh, that didn't work at all. Well, that's not really a big problem, because I don't need the whole tape. I really just need the edge. I wish that would have torn better, though. You know what? I'll just turn it upside down. So still have a nice good edge on the bottom. I'm just going to preemptively tear some here. Ultimately, because I'm using a bunch of lines here to make a rounded segment, you're probably not going to get, it's probably not going to be perfect. It's probably going to have some kind of linear elements to it. But honestly, I think that's pretty unavoidable when you're trying to mask off a rounded surface. Now, I've seen people use clear tape that they could kind of distort to make the lines better. And that is certainly an option. I'm just not very good at that. And I'm okay with this approach. If there is a downside to this, it's that I'm using a lot of tape, probably a lot of excess tape. But the upside is that I need to cover most of this rocket anyway. So the excess tape, well, it is accomplishing a goal, if not the goal of putting the tape on it in the first place. All right, so I've made it the whole way around. The only last thing is that instructions say that I'm supposed to follow, there's a little bump here. So I'm going to try to mask that off. I expect that this is going to be kind of messy because I'm going up and over something. And anytime you go up and then back down, at least in my experience, I don't get a particularly strong seal right in here. And paint has a habit of leaking through. So hopefully that won't be the outcome here. All right, so this is masked off. I do need to put more covering, and it's probably just going to be tape over here, and get that, I guess. This I can get pretty easily with a thicker piece of this tape, and I need to mask off not this part, so this part and then the back. The inside of this, I don't really care what happens to it, but I think I'm just going to stuff some paper towels in here to try to not have it get black paint in there. So anyway, I have some finishing to do. That's it for this video. Hopefully the last video will be final assembly. So I will see you then.